friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Lefebvre, and today we are painting day 1 of our 12 days of mini landscape paintings for the holidays. Let's jump in and get started. Hey friends, before we jump into today's video, I have a special announcement to make. I finally know the date of the release of my beautiful travel brush set. So as you will see throughout these videos, I continuously use these brushes. I am absolutely in love with them. And I didn't know while filming when they would be released, but now I have a date. December 14th, my travel brush set is officially dropping on Craftimo's website. So make sure to head over to craftimo.com, get on that list to be notified when they drop, and join me back here for a live stream launch party on December 14th, where I'm going to be using the brushes live. They're going to go live on the website as well. We're going to be doing a little giveaway of a couple sets. So make sure to join me December 14th. I'm so excited to share these with you. They are just perfect. All right, let's jump into today's video. Okay, friends, welcome to day 1 of our 12 days of holiday landscape mini paintings. For the majority of these 12 days, we're going to be doing different little landscapes, but we may throw in another image here and there. I haven't completely decided, but the reason why I wanted to do landscapes is because with these paintings, I'm creating teeny tiny ornaments. This is just an example. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this exact painting. I just kind of wanted to see what it would look like with a border and what it looks like in the frame. But this is the goal of my 12 landscapes. I am creating little ornaments with them for gifts for friends and my kids' teachers. But if you do not have these frames, or you cannot find them anywhere, you don't have to create ornaments. You could make little name tags or gift tags out of them. You could create cards. You could make these designs even bigger. You do not have to stick to the complete format that I'm doing. I'm just showing you and giving you tips on how to paint small. Now, I really like painting tiny because it takes less time. It can be tricky because you are painting so small, but I find you need less detail. I find it a little less overwhelming. When you're doing a really large landscape, I feel like you see every detail and you need to add more. But when you're painting something this small, you can get away with a few dots here and there that look like snow, or just a few lines for branches. And I just find it really accessible. Now, if you do have a shakier hand, it may be a bit tricky, but make it a little bit more abstract. It does not have to be the exact same of what I'm doing. I just want you to have fun and enjoy the 12 days. So before we jump into painting tiny, I am going to be painting on these tiny little pieces of paper. Now it's up to you. I'm going to be taping down to create a border like I did for this one. I just think it looks nice, but you could always paint right to the edge. Now, if you are painting right to the edge, what you're going to want to do is either tape, like create a bigger piece of paper and have it taped right to where the edge would be, because you're going to need to tape it down. If I start adding a bunch of water to this tiny paper, it's going to warp like crazy. So you're going to want to tape it down somehow. So I would maybe do it on a watercolor block that's nice and flat to start, or a bigger paper, or tape it to make it larger than the actual piece. Or you can just do this and have little tiny tape to create a border. Totally up to you. But before we start, I wanted to give you a couple tips on a scrap piece of paper. So for this whole 12 days, you are going to need smaller brushes. So I don't have too many smaller brushes in my sets. I believe in my subscription boxes I think have a size 1, but in my regular set, the smallest I have is a size 2 round, which will work. My tips for when you're trying to paint tiny and create really delicate small lines: if you are holding your brush on an angle, more of the bristles are going to touch down while you are painting, like so. So if you want to create tiny thin lines, what you're going to want to do is have a vertical hold with your paintbrush. So just the tip is touching. Do you see that? If you hold it on the side, more of the bristles are going to touch down, and it's going to be harder to get those details. So do a vertical hold. I like to hold it really close to the tip so I can get the most control. If I hold it too far away, I have less control, but maybe it's a little bit more like of an abstract kind of looser style. So it's up to you, whatever feels more comfortable, but you are going to want to do a vertical hold. So I have this size 2 with me, but I also have my newer travel brushes. that will be coming out in the next month or so. And there are some smaller sizes. This is a size 1. I have this size 2 that is actually like super, super pointed. So I might be using this, but use smaller brushes. You can also get some nice small brushes off Amazon very inexpensively. So that's what you're going to want to use for this. Now we're going to be doing a lot of trees. So I'm going to show you quickly before we get into the actual painting of how I would do a tree. I'm actually going to be using my size 2 for this. And like I said, with smaller paintings, you don't need to focus on too much detail. So if I'm painting a tree that's literally this tiny, right? You're not going to see every branch. Now, I typically tell you not to do this when we're making trees. But when we are doing it really, really small, you can kind of just tap side to side, maybe a bit more of a zigzag. And these little taps will act like branches and pine needles. So you can do this kind of line side to side. Just make it a little bit more, I'm going to extend this a little bit. Just make it a little bit more messy. And I'm just tapping side to side with my brush. The beauty of painting tiny is that you really don't need to worry about each individual branch and like tiny pine needles. You really don't. You're just doing this tapping motion. So you might want to practice that first before you head into your first painting. The other type of tree that I might be doing often in these paintings are just regular kind of leafy trees, but obviously they don't have leaves on them. I can't remember. Are they called deciduous or coniferous? I don't know. Either way, long trunks. So I'm applying a little bit more pressure so they're a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to lift my pressure through so there's nice, really thin branches. So the trunks are always a little bit thicker, but I want you to practice just kind of, I am holding it a little bit further away to get this kind of jagged edge for my branches or the jagged kind of lines. I don't want too much control because I don't want really straight branches. I want them to be a little bit kind of crooked and wonky, a little less control. So I might actually hold my brush further away. Okay, and I'm just tapping with the tip of my brush down while I'm doing this. It's just barely touching, and that's how you get those really, really thin lines. Okay. Now, the other thing that you are going to run into with these paintings is water control. Because we are painting tiny, we do not need a lot of water. What's going to help you with that is using a smaller brush. Smaller brushes naturally don't hold as much water, so you're not going to have as much trouble, when you're creating those big pools and puddles. But you can still hold a decent amount on this brush. And if I have too much water on my brush and too much paint and I'm trying to create these tiny trees, I'm just going to get these little puddles. See this? I have way too much paint on my brush. To see that? I don't know if you can see how much it's puddling or pooling. That's too much. So before you go into your painting, you can wash off your brush. You can add a bunch of color to your brush. Tap it on your paper towel before you begin. That way you have a good amount of color, but not as much water. And then you can get those really nice, smaller strokes without it pooling everywhere. Okay, water control. When in doubt, always tap your brush on your paper. Now, if this happens, not all is lost. You can always soak it up. And then you can just go over, tap it on your paper towel, like so. But water control is going to be a big thing just because we are working so tiny. Okay, so those are my tips for these 12 paintings, and I think it's time to get into it. Okay, so I have it taped down so I can create a little border. And for our first painting, I actually want to make it more on the simpler side so we can get used to painting trees and landscapes. So something a little bit more similar to this. So if you would like to take a pencil just to create your horizon line, you can, but you don't have to. Okay, so I'm going to get my size 2, I think, actually maybe my size a little bit bigger, like a size 6. And I'm going to pick my sky color. So I have this blue here, which is a phthalo blue. Now I'm using my beautiful ceramic palette that we just launched with Craftimo. I love using this. And the colors that I have in my palette for this whole 12 days, phthalo blue red shade, indigo, permanent yellow light, permanent rose, ultramarine deep. I feel like this was a gold, or no, maybe a gamboge hue, and then a cadmium red hue, I think. Don't quote me on that, but something along those lines, okay? So I'm going to be using this color for my sky, and do I want to create clouds? I think I want to create clouds. So before I actually dip it into my color, I'm going to just wet up the background, just the top half. And I'm going to create some clouds by doing some negative painting. So meaning I'm going to grab my blue and I'm just going to paint around these little cloud shapes and then paint the rest blue. Just a couple clouds. They don't have to be anything crazy. Now, typically, the sky will be a little bit darker closer to the top. And as we get to the horizon line, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just adding a little bit more blue closer to the top, and then it should fade out. Now I'm losing a little bit of the white there, so I just washed off my brush, dried it, and I'm just going to push some of that blue away. And I'm wiping it on my paper towel to make room for some of those clouds, but I have to wipe my brush on my paper towel after lifting some of that blue. Otherwise, you'll go right back in there with the blue that you've lifted. You could always also grab a tissue to make some clouds if you want. Totally up to you what kind of look you want to go for. I actually kind of like that. Like so. But I do want to make sure that this is a little bit wet because we're going to create some trees here. So I'm just going back in with a little bit of water. This is one of those water control moments. Do not go back in with a lot of water. Just go over it with your wet brush just to make it all nice and wet again, going around those clouds. And I'm going to grab some dark green. So I just mixed a little bit of my indigo with yellow. And I'm just going to do these vertical lines, starting from the top and going down. Again, you don't want a lot of water on your brush. And you don't want, you don't want a lot of water on your brush because you don't want it to bleed like crazy into the sky. You can go over some of those clouds if you like. And I'm just doing these vertical lines. And because the sky in the background is still wet, we're getting this really out of focus, blurred look to our trees. And these are going to be background trees. Like so. See that? I might grab a little bit more indigo, just make it a little bit darker. You could even do another little row of trees in front of that while it's still wet. And the reason why I'm starting from the top and going down, when you lift your brush and you're doing wet on wet, where you lift your brush, the paint explodes. So you want to make sure that you're not exploding at the top, because then it will take away from that pointed top on your tree. You want to bring your lines down. Okay? Like so. Now, because this was dry here where the cloud is, I'm just going to blend it out a little bit, kind of create those tree tops in front of the clouds, just kind of tapping back and forth like that and like that. Okay, so now what I want to do, I actually want to create a little bit of white in the trees, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to wash off my brush completely. I'm going to dry it on my paper towel. And then I'm just going to kind of go and tap, maybe not completely dry it, just dry it a little bit so you're not getting a lot of water on your brush. But if you tap a little bit of clean water on these trees, just a little bit, see how it pushes the pigment away? It almost looks like there's lightness towards the trees, like there's snowfall on it. And then I'm going to let that completely dry. Okay, now that it's dry, I'm going to create a bit of the snow. So the snow, while it's white, we still want to have a border there. So we need some sort of color down there. I love to use ultramarine just because it's such a warm blue and it creates this like purpley bluish snow. And I'm just going to skim it across the bottom and the side of where the snow is. So you get this color kind of framing it nicely. I'm just going to tap some of that off with my paper towel and just skim it across. And we get a little bit of this dry brush effect. Okay. So you have some of that white there peeking through and then just a little bit of blue. I might do a little bit of darker blue, but just very, very little. If anything, this whole painting tiny is going to teach you water control, patience, and accuracy. You're going to need a lot less water and paint than you think. Okay. Then before we do trees in the foreground, I'm just going to let that blue dry. And now I want to do some trees in the foreground. So far, it's kind of looking a little summerish. So I do want to make sure that it does look like winter. We're going to have to add some snow. So you might want to get either like a white opaque paint out, it could even be an acrylic marker. I have my Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white ink here, gouache, even acrylic. If that's what you have, you can definitely use that. Okay. So I have my dark green here and I'm going to create one tall tree here like so. So I'm using the tip of my brush to get this really fine point. And then I'm going to try and make sure my hand's out of the way. I'm just creating these really tiny V's almost at the top, very, very tiny. And then it's going to start to kind of come down. Again, we're just tapping side to side. You don't need too much detail. And we're going to put snow on this. So if it has some holes, we can cover that up with snow after. And I'm just using the tip of my brush to tap back and forth. And you want to make this kind of triangular tree shape, obviously. Like that. Maybe I'll do another one just for fun. I'm going to do another one right here, a little bit smaller. Okay. And again, just tapping back and forth. Now, I like the trees in the background, but I want some more defined trees, I think. So while I'm waiting for those to dry, I'm just going to do some really loose, smaller trees on this tree line. Again, just a vertical line going down and then just tapping back and forth. It does not have to be super detailed by any means. So these are a lot of evergreen trees in this painting today. These are some of my favorite trees to do. And if you want to be kind of quick with it, you can kind of just do the little like vertical line and then a zigzag. Like it barely looks like a tree, but because it's so tiny, it does look like a tree, right? Okay, we're just going back and forth on the tree line. Make them nice and close, and we're going to add some snow on them after because this is looking a little summery with all the green. Okay, let's make sure this is completely dry before we add the snow. All right, there we go. It's nice and dry. I'm going to take my Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. I'm going to get some nice white opaque paint in there. Again, you can use acrylic gouache, acrylic markers, anything that's white and opaque. And you're just going to tap these little snowy bits on your tree. And I'm just using the tip of my brush to kind of go back and forth. Leave, obviously, some of the greenery. There, now it looks like a snow painting, a winter painting. But just in some of the cracks, just where the snow would collect, right? Like that. And then also in the background. And this I'm just really getting messy with. I'm barely doing it accurately. I'm just kind of tapping it randomly on these trees. And then if you wanted to, you could just take an even lighter wash and just add some little bits of white back there, but you don't need a ton. Now, I like to flick some white snow. Now, because this is such a tiny painting, we don't want huge snowflakes in the foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my size 8 round. Actually, before I do that, hold on. Just one little thing's bugging me about the clouds. They're too white. Just taking like the tiniest bit of like indigo or blue. I'm just going to add some extra color in there. Like that. It was just bugging me. Okay, so I'm going to take my white again with my bigger brush, but just watering it down. Instead of like tapping it like this, where I'm going to get big chunks, I'm going to use my finger and I'm going to pull it back and then flick it like that. Or you could use a toothbrush so you get smaller snowfall. Does that make sense? They're smaller dots. And then it just looks a little bit more delicate. If you want to do a couple bigger ones, obviously you can. But there we go. I think that's pretty good. So let's take this off. My desk is now obviously covered in white paint. Actually, I'm going to dry it first. And there is our first teeny tiny painting. Let's see what it looks like in the frame. And there we go. There is our first teeny tiny winter painting. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow for day 2. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, click that notification bell so you're notified every time I come out with a new video, and follow me on all my other platforms for tons more content. I'll see you guys tomorrow with day 2. Bye, everyone.